The trick to installing the fork tube is to put a large blade screwdriver in the split and drive that in a little bit, and then you can slide the tube up through the bottom and it'll go in nice and easy. And then when you're finished setting the height, you just pull the screwdriver out and it's captive. Now when I install the tubes, I make sure that the line I put to show me where the front of the tube is facing me, and that makes sure that the slight kink in the bottom of the tubes on both sides is in the same direction. The other thing I do is set the tube height to 160 millimeters, and that's measured from this shoulder all the way to the top of the tube, like that. Don't do it from this sleeve here, up here. It's the shoulder down here. So I'm going to install a top plate from Toaster Tan. It's a much stouter design than the flimsy plate that BMW uses. And it fits right over the top of the fork tubes and the steering stem like the standard plate. Now there's also a modified steering stem cap nut with a deeper skirt here, and that increases the contact between the top plate and the steering stem, which helps stiffen the whole top end of the forks. There are also some sleeves that fit on top of the fork tube, and when these are installed, you torque the cap nut to 40-45 foot-pounds and then slide these in. Now they're closely machined, so you have to get them in square, and when they're in, the top of the ring should be 0.7 millimeters proud of the top plate. This is the bracket that holds the instrument cluster, and it fits into the Toaster Tan top brace like that, so it'll stick up. However, there's a lot of variation in the brackets, and I actually had to grind off the edge on both sides so I could get a fit into the base of the Toaster Tan top brace. And then what I'm going to do is just do a quick check with the washer and the nut that I can get both of them in, and that seems to be going smooth, and that one seems to be going smooth. So I think I've got it ground enough that it'll fit nicely when I install it. Now a modification has to be made to the handlebar riser, and you have to extract the two studs, and you can use some doubled M8 nuts to back them out. The Toaster Tan brace is a little bit thicker, so you need to have something longer, and what I like to use are some Allen bolts, and then they'll screw in from the bottom this way to assemble the risers on the handlebar. The short bolt is an M8 by 55, and the longer bolt is an M8 by 65. So this is the instrument cluster mounting bracket, and it has some grommets and some steel sleeves that fit in the center. And then there's a fair amount of hardware that's used to mount the bracket, and also it's used to mount the handlebar risers to the top of the bracket. So starting here with the big grommet, there's a metal cap that goes on each side of the grommet, and then I like to use a flat washer and a wave washer under the head of the bolt because I'm using Allen head bolts instead of the original studs. Now with the original studs there was just a nut and a wave washer, but I kind of like to add the flat washer as a contact surface to help the lock washer keep the bolt from going anywhere. So how that's going to work is it's going to come up through the bottom like that, and then this long bolt actually is the part of the mounting for the handlebar riser, and of course the screw threads are in the top of it, so I'll thread that bolt up from the bottom like that. Now the second bolt that goes through the handlebar riser is the shorter Allen, and once again I'm going to use a flat wave washer combination on that, so it's going to slide up through the bottom like that, and then it'll screw into the base here like this. Now there's another grommet over here and a much smaller bolt, but it comes down from the top like that through the top plate to secure the back of the the back of the instrument cluster bracket. And it comes with a flat washer that covers the face of the grommet and a lock nut. So I'm going to actually use an Allen for that because I like the looks of that on the top plate. So that's pretty much all the hardware and how it all goes together to mount the instrument bracket and the handlebar risers. It's a whole bunch of hardware. Now before I put the cap rings in here and adjust the height, I want to set the steering stem cap nut to about 40 foot-pounds to seat the plate, but I don't want to spin the adjuster underneath, so I'm going to slide in the hook wrench and then torque up the cap bolt to 40 foot-pounds, which will give it some preload, and that should keep everything square. There we go. Then I can adjust the height of the cap rings on the top of the fork tube. So I adjusted the fork tubes, and now the rings are just proud by about 0.7 millimeter on both of them. So I've got the top plate set correctly. So after I've got the top plate set and the fork tube height set, I want to tighten the pinch bolt here to hold them in place, and then I'm going to remove the top plate because I have to do some measurements on the fork tubes to get them aligned. Now I'm using a stainless steel bolt, so I applied a little bit of anti-seize, and I'm going to back the torque off on it to only 25 foot-pounds instead of 29, which is the specification. The reason for backing the torque off if you use anti-seize is that it's actually behaving a bit like a lubricant, and so if you put the stock torque on, you actually are increasing the force, and if you're not careful, in some cases you could actually strip some threads. So I'm going to back this off. That's about 13% less from the stock 29 setting to the torque I just put on it at 25. So getting the instrument cluster bracket to mount can be a pain in the ass, but I find the easiest thing to do is to attach the Allen that comes through the top plate that goes through the small grommet, and you can do that pretty easily and just get it finger tight, and that keeps the bracket in place. And then there's enough of a gap on top of the large grommet that you can slide the top cap plate in underneath like that. So that's pretty easy. Then you can take the long bolt with the wave washer, flat washer, and cap and push it up through the bottom like that. And then you can take the bottom part of the handlebar riser, and the real rounded piece here is the front, and the sort of sharp piece is the back. Just put it on like that. And then what I do next is I put the top and just tighten up the Allen bolt with my finger a couple of turns, and that'll secure that. And then I just take the small, well, I should say the shorter bolt with the wave washer and the flat washer that secures the back or the bottom end of the handlebar riser. And I can get that to come up. And again, a couple of threads, and I've got it. And I just repeat that for the other riser. I installed these covers that go on the top of the fork tube cap nuts, and this is all of the toaster tan top brace hardware installed, along with the handlebar risers and the instrument cluster bracket. So I think that all looks pretty nice.